Good evening from Charleston, which has witnessed this afternoon extraordinary scenes from relatives of those gunned down in the church just behind me on Wednesday night. As Dylan Roof, the alleged killer, appeared in court to face 9 charges of murder, he listened, it seemed, without emotion, as children who'd lost parents and parents who'd lost children in this deeply religious community told him he was forgiven.
I would never talk to her ever again. I would never be able to hold her again. But I forgive you. And have mercy on your soul. You hurt me. You hurt a lot of people. But God forgive you. And I forgive you.
You have killed some of the most beautifulest people that I know. Every fiber in my body hurts. And I'll never be the same. Tawanza Sanders is my son, but Tawanza was my hero. Tawanza was my hero. But as we said in Bible study, we enjoyed you, but may God have mercy on you.
Extraordinary, painful words of those relatives who came face to face, as it were, with the alleged killer. Well, police are treating the killings at the African American church as a hate crime. But the word race in a city with such a strong history and past of slavery is one that many people here still find uncomfortable. Was this crime symptomatic of a wider problem America still has? I've spent my brief time here trying to find out. Candles, balloons, teddy bears, TV cameras. There's something painfully familiar about these scenes of grief in America. But this one, this time, comes with an even sharper sense of hatred than usual. One young man who claimed he wanted to start a race war and 9 dead black Americans.
I think everything may be at a standstill. Something happens and then they'll say, okay, we'll do this, we'll change the gun laws, we'll do that, but then they go back to being normal. I don't think anything has changed. I think racism is still alive and well.
The question this city's struggling to answer is whether to see this as an isolated incident perpetrated by a mentally ill man with a gun, or whether it plays into the wider issue that Charleston, all these years later, has still not quite put its racial past to bed.
I still see a race problem. I mean, I lived in Europe for the past 7 years, and then moving back to America, I see a major problem with the race going on, with the racism going on here in America.
Early morning, the Stars and Stripes flies at half-mast. You won't see a Confederacy flag here in Charleston, but those figures from history who did support slavery are still celebrated here. Just 100 yards or so from the church towers, the figure of this man, John Caldwell Calhoun. He was the vice president in the early half of the 19th century, and he's known for his intense defense of slavery and of minority rights. Now, if that sounds like a contradiction to our ears, it wasn't to his. The minority he was trying to defend was the rights of Southerners here, the Southern whites, who he felt were outnumbered by the more populated northern states. And it was their rights he wanted writing into the legislation. The mayor of Charleston, giving a press conference to Hungry Crews this morning, wants to believe it's a very different city today.
Charleston is a loving community, and one where our citizens of all races and backgrounds and all neighborhoods work very closely together.
Disingenuous, says the civil rights group NAACP. They see what happened here as part of an ongoing problem.
South Carolina has some problems if they're unique to only one group of people or one race of people or one ethnic group. Doesn't that make it special? Yes, it does. And we have in South Carolina a race problem.
They'll remind you of the death of Walter Scott, a black man shot 5 times from behind by a white police officer just 2 months ago in the north of this city. Michael Slager and Dylan Roof are now next to each other in adjacent cells up the road in Charleston County Jail. In the affluent French Quarter, the place they call the old slave market, now the domain of tourists and tradesmen, Andy is a born and bred Charleston man. He acknowledges a problem, but listen how he dare not speak its name.
I'm talking about, all the Ferguson thing and the New York thing. There's been incidents all over where it's been some guy causing a problem or whatever, and everybody makes a big uproar about it, and there's protests.
Race.
Yes,
race.
yes.
Shirley has been weaving baskets here since 1973, a trade she learned at her mother's knee and passed on to her children. It's a look that seems to belong to Charleston's bygone age, a sense of decades where nothing has changed. And perhaps, in very real terms, it hasn't. Nate Silver, America's leading pollster, puts your chances of being killed by gun crime at average for the developing world if you're a white American. For black Americans, it's nearly 12 times higher. Well, we'll pick up with some of those points with Reverend Anthony Evans, president of the Black Church Initiative here, who has many thousands in his congregations. And Anthony Evans, the mayor of Charleston today, said he had been very proud of the way the city had come together. It hadn't been seen as a hate crime even, or a race crime. It had been something that brought people together instead of rioting.
Well, the mayor's delusional. This is very clearly a racial crime, a hate crime. They were killed because they were black. They were killed because they were targeted. And the pastor of this church was assassinated because he was a public official and he spoke against the white power structure of this city because of the fact of the previous killing of an unarmed African American, Walter Scott, in North Charleston, who was shot in the back by a white road racist police officer here in Charleston.
So you see those two as a line, do you? Do you see a pattern?
Oh, it's no question. You take the 12-year-old in Cleveland, shot dead. You take Michael Brown, shot dead. Mr. Gray, dead. Gardner in New York, dead. No federal action, no care. We are dispendable in this country, and we will not stand for it anymore.
Have things not got better? A lot of people will be looking to President Obama saying that was a historic win for a black American, and nothing's changed from the sound of it.
Well, after 6 years of the presidency, black business is not growing. He has done little or anything for black unemployment. It's 14%. If he get the trade deal, that goes up to 18%. So you judge it. Nothing has terribly changed, but we have a little access to health care, but just nothing at all. And he has not in any way changed the racial attitude toward whites, toward blacks in this country. And
Why do you think that is?
It's simply because he has been scared to engage the issue. For instance, in his news conference, his latest news conference, he talked about gun control. We ain't worried about no gun control in America. Everybody got a gun in America. This was a racial attack on the black church because we refuse to take on the line of this society. We will speak out on every evil issue there is.
But a lot of people will share his concern that actually this is about gun control. Fundamentally, people of every color are getting killed by guns in America.
Yeah, but whites have more guns. And the whole question is that here's a 21-year-old young man who took a gun given to him by his parents. And by the way, we want to know who is his parents and what value do you teach a young male who will go out and kill 9 innocent church-going people? How outrageous.
People will say this is not representative of Charleston. I've spoken to a lot of voices today who say he wasn't from here, he was from out of town. This is not representative. This is, if you like, a city that's made clear that the Confederate flag is no longer welcome here. It cannot be hung up.
2 questions. This is representative of Charleston because Charleston is a part of America. And we have had patterns of white kids killing multiple individuals. You take the school. You take Connecticut when they killed 23 children. This is very much representative of America. You take the movie theater who killed 13 people. So come on, give me a break. America is a very violent society, and this time it is visited on our church, and this is the last time it will be visited on our church. Let me be very clear. We're not talking about any violence. We are completely nonviolent. But the whole question is, they will not do this again in our church.
Reverend Evans, thank you very much indeed. We appreciate your time here on Newsnight. I'd like to introduce Patricia Williams-Lazan, who is a close friend of one of those who lost their lives here, as well as a cultural historian, I know. First, Patricia, just talk to us a little bit about Cynthia Hurd, who is a librarian here.
Sure. I met Cynthia when I moved to Charleston in 2010 through my work. And though we came together through a partnership, a professional partnership, we became friends. She frequently asked me to visit her church. Unfortunately, I did not visit her church while she was alive. When we had programs at Dart Library, which is where she was when I first met her, we had numerous occasions to spend together, and she was a quintessential librarian with a love of books and a desire to foster a love of literacy.
What has been extraordinary in some of the scenes today in the courtroom from relatives is this instant, extraordinary ability to speak of forgiveness, whatever the grief they're going through. What does that say to you? Is it about this particular religious community, or is it about not wanting this to be about race? How do you read it?
I think there are a couple of things. Number one, African Americans have historically been forgiven. You know, most of us are Christians, so we rest upon our Protestant beliefs, and forgiveness is one of the cornerstones of our faith. The other piece is this sense that forgiveness will help us move forward, and that's important. But at the same time, we have to speak truth to power. We need to say what this incident was and what it's indicative of, and so that while we are forgiving, we also need to be planning and moving forward as a collective, not just African Americans, but all Americans and all Charlestonians, because this race issue is dividing all of us. But I will say it is disproportionately negatively impacting African Americans, for sure.
So do you agree with Reverend Evans when he says you can't ignore the race issue in an element like this?
I absolutely 100% agree with him. You cannot ignore it. And I think the problem that I've seen as an outsider here in Charleston, I can't claim that my family has been here for generations, but as an outsider looking in, that it's very easy to talk about race in sort of this really, really abstract, colorful way, without really getting to the real everyday barriers that keep black people and white people and other people of color separated. There are real systemic barriers that keep African Americans and other poor people of color from, having a way up towards upward mobility, and we have to address that right here on the peninsula.
Patricia Williams-Lazan, thank you very much for your time here this evening. And you will have heard Reverend Evans talking about the death of Walter Scott just 2 months ago, a man who was shot in the back, in the head, by a police officer, a white police officer. Now, interestingly enough, he, as I mentioned in my piece, is in a jail cell adjacent to that of Dylan Roof, the alleged killer of those in the church behind me. And on Monday, he will stand trial for murder. He may get 30 years if he's found guilty. Now, if that goes through, it will send a very powerful signal at this moment to many black communities in America who simply don't feel that the power of law enforcement is on their side right now.